Thanks for your patience, everybody.
Apologies, that was me. Tech.
We're not using tech as an excuse. I'm happy we're here, and yeah, let's get started.
Okay, let's delve in. So, I just want to start by saying I'm really grateful to be back here. We had a very beautiful, raw, vulnerable. I had, when you have the slight, what do they call it, Bren Brown, like vulnerability hangover after you. Only very slight because you held such a beautiful space. But I'm really excited to be here, and we're kind of flipping the script this week, and I get to interview you. And we touched on it last week. How we know each other is actually we were part of a pretty high level mastermind of female leaders, and I was just like blown away when I met you, Camilla, because you were just like, how old are you?
How old do you think I am?
Aren't you like 29, 30, something? Yeah, something crazy like that. And I remember meeting you and being like, who is this like young woman who's just like working with global CEO leaders around the world, so committed to her own personal evolution, just like dives in at every opportunity and holds space for these really powerful people to transform. And the dedication, the devotion, both in your personal life and professional life, I was just like, whoa, okay. This woman is just on fire. And then I loved when you invited me into these conversations, because I know what you're passionate about is really helping people and leaders not just have this outer success, but really have true inner freedom, a life that not just looks good and impactful, but actually feels good and is true to who they are authentically. And I love that you're opening up these conversations to get a bit real and raw behind the scenes of what happens behind the scenes in leadership. So I guess where I wanted to start today is just a little bit more about that. Like, why did you want to have these conversations? And what are the conversations that you're having with leaders behind closed doors that you're wanting to bring more out into the open so more people can be part of that?
Well, first of all, thank you. When Sarah joined us before we pressed the go live button, and we literally had 20 seconds today, she said, I'm so glad I'm not in the hot seat this week. And she's making the hot seat really pleasant. I'm literally about to blush. I've literally just come back from our community run here. But I really feel seen and appreciate you. And thank you for that reflection. I really think that it's something I couldn't not do and something I was very selfish about. I created conversations and conditions that I was craving at a very, very deep level because I felt unmet in my environment. I felt there was a lot of superficiality around me, and I just knew reality was deeper than what I could feel and see and perceive and sense. And I've always been pretty sensitive and pretty neurotic. So the two together ended up being pretty good assets in this work. And really it's born, I think my body of work is born initially from ego and a really deep curiosity to understand my own psyche and my own self and my own being, and ultimately to find a place where I belong. I spent the first decade of my consciousness exploration feeling like I was the black sheep everywhere and pretty angry and bitter about everything around me because nobody got it. As I got off my little high horse and started really delving into my own shadows and really making space for my own fallibility, and I was so arrogant, and I'm on a humbling journey. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about how everyone's doing the best that they can. Most people feel this work. Everyone can benefit from this work if they're human. And my personal area of deep passion, I love that you use the word devotion. because I feel pretty loyal, and maybe we'll talk about devotion and commitment later on, because I used to think they were freedom and commitment were separate, and I've realized that they're the same for me. And I find so much freedom in my devotion and my commitment to this work and in other areas of my life. So yeah, I think that's how I ended up here. It was deeply, deeply personal and born of suffering. And I think as I started to do the inner work, I started to create space inside myself to actually sit with questions I never dared confront and contemplate. And in that space and in that silence, I started to co-create, because it wasn't just me that was creating, it was much bigger than me, but co-create something that came from a place of desire. And desire is pure. Craving isn't, but desire is pure. And that changed everything for me, because the suffering started to fade, and it became just a lot more fun and pleasurable, and it worked better too. In terms of what kind of conversations I have with these leaders, I mean, so many, and I'm happy to get into whichever aspects feel most. I know you've asked me this question before, so I love that you're bringing this here. This is a personal question. It's like, I want to be a fly on the wall in these workshops you do. And the most powerful sessions that I have with the most quote unquote impressive leaders out there are deeply human conversations. They're conversations that, a lot of the people I work with have very high stakes roles. They're in regulated industries. They have thousands of employees looking to them. They have a lot of constraints that they're juggling. They're mediatized, sometimes involved in politics. And so, we're very free in the way we dress and the way we show up, and like very rebellious, and still we're at our edge. But a lot of my clients are would get fired for saying the wrong thing, because there's journalists around and they'll go and distort the truth. So there's this mask to manage, as well as their own selves to contemplate. And so often they get lost in what's real, like which part of them is them and which part of them is this character they've been playing, and what's actually the truth. And I think that's a fine line. But so often, this week I've had a few new clients who are really dealing with crises that their boss done a few scandals and they feel betrayed, that an employee is leaving, and that their wives feel completely neglected. And it's really, I think, because there's a lack of safety in their world to be able to even admit that they're human, to admit that they're fallible. So even though there is a business aspect to this work, I think the best conversations are the spiritual ones that help people not even feel validated, but access parts of themselves they've never even thought to touch, and then touch that with approval for themselves and see the responsoring of that happen. It's pretty therapeutic, and the amount of resilience and capacity and strength and relief that comes from that just makes my heart burst.
I love that. And you can clearly feel you are so passionate about what you do. And even just through what you're sharing, I can really see how you are this bridge between, you can relate on that corporate level or entrepreneurial level, where people have a role and have to play a game, if you will. They have to they play a role, play a game, they're creating impact. And then there's this deeply spiritual side where it's like, who am I, and how is my experiences in life shaped who I am, and maybe even why I chose to do what I'm doing. And we can sometimes compartmentalize those. And what I feel you give permission for people, and I know it's a big part of your own journey, is to give space for all of that, because everything touches everything, and allow people to explore this in themselves, which is going to ripple into their relationships, their business life. But often people just need a space to say the things where they're unafraid of I can't say this, or I can't say, like, just a space to be fully themselves and own who they are, and then let that, naturally infiltrate into their other areas of life.
It totally ripples through. And I think mostly because their own capacity to hold more expands. And so their identity shifts and they're not the same person. So their worldview, their perspective of the world isn't the same. And so the lens through which they perceive the professional or personal dimensions of their lives are up-leveled and different. But I also feel like my favorite place to play with clients is what happens after they've won the game, right? So it's like, okay, yeah, they've been playing this game. They've gotten pretty far. They've gotten further than they probably believed they would have gotten. And it often doesn't feel how they thought they would. And then they're clueless as to what comes next. It's like, what, you keep climbing some fake mountain that's not even yours. And it's really, really fun because it's often clunky, the transition, right? Like when you've spent your whole life aligning to external metrics, it like the funnest part is when they shift, they start to value how they feel above and beyond everything else. They start to have more pleasure, more flow, more alignment in their lives. Then their external results 10x's, that doesn't even double it, 10x's in ways that make no sense. So they enter that God zone of magic. And then we get to focus and be more intentional in sessions to develop skills that most humans don't get training on. Even me, it still blows my mind, but like, how do we start to have conversations around your capacity to perceive, your ability to dream, your ability to access different realms at the same time? How do you shapeshift? How do you create a legacy? How do you like completely dissolve your ego so that you can be a clean channel? And my clients that have stayed with me for years and years that have gotten to this level, like, it just blows my mind to see them walk the world. Like, and not all of them are massive leaders. Some of them are just impacting their local communities. Some of them are like smaller entrepreneurs, but everything is energy. And there's a material world we all have human agreements around, but underneath that, reality is energetic. And when we start to consciously integrate that, it's a different life that we're living.
Yeah, it's very much from what I'm hearing, it's like that shift from like being in the world but not of the world. You really let go to the attachments of who the world says you to be, and you're focusing much more on the inside out way of living. And when we're talking about we have one life, we've come here to live it, like, how do we want to experience this human experience? And when you're working with people at that depth of level, and that is the focus, like, who am I being and how am I experiencing my day-to-day world and everything that happens out here? I still play the game, but I'm not bought into it. I'm not attached to it. I'm playing inside out. That's what I'm hearing as you're speaking. And I mean, who doesn't play that game? That game sounds way more fun. Something that I want to hone in on, and you and I have had conversations about this, and I would love to know both, again, where you're at with this personally, and then I know how you operate. You're always like, cool, this is something I'm called to. You embody it, you deepen in it yourself, and then bring it to clients and people that you work with. The God zone. We love talking about this. I love talking about this. I know you do too. Like, what does that mean to you? I'm guessing some people would call this flow state, accessing higher states of consciousness, whatever you want to call it. People might have different perceptions. How do you support people to really be in that more of the time and live and create from that space?
I love this question.
You knew I was going to go there eventually.
I had no idea you were going to go there. I mean, the one word is alignment, right? But what on earth does that even mean? I mean, this state is a state that it's a level of consciousness that is wider than our individual intellectual, cognitive, rational left brain mind. And so our brain can't really understand it. It's a much more powerful way to give people a taste and an experience of what it feels like. And anyone right now listening to this, it's like, when's the last time you felt so alive you didn't need to pee for 5 hours? It's like you weren't hungry, you weren't thinking about anything else. You weren't in your head overthinking. You were so absorbed in the present moment because you were just loving whatever it was that was in front of you. And it could be anything. It could be you were surfing, you were leading a workshop, you were running, you were having a dinner conversation with someone about your favorite topic, you were painting, right? So this is a natural human state that hopefully we enter on a regular basis. And I think the concept of the God zone itself, actually, it was coined by Melanie. I've been working with Melanie Anlayer for the last few months. And really, it's taken different dimensions for me. And what I'll share today, because I could talk about this for 15 hours. So just gonna
that puts you in your God zone, talking about the God zone.
Yeah, I'll talk about the God zone for me and how I'm relating it to it now. But I had this really strong visual in January that, one of the features of being in this state is you're not just in your isolated, individual consciousness. You're wider, you're connected to the field, you're connected to other people, you're connected to you and your center, but also what's happening around you. And so it's a different quality of presence. And to me, I realized, wow, I'm connected to other people, but I'm also connected to something really powerful that I don't really understand, but that can really communicate with me. And it's a part of me, but it's a part of me that often I'm disconnected from because I'm a human, right? And so when I'm in it, I have this metaphor of it's like I'm playing chess with God, and you can replace God with anything you believe in, like the universe, energy, whatever, religion, spirituality, whatever, spirit, right? But I'm playing chess with this thing, and it's like, when I decided in my business that I like pulled up a seat at the table for my board and I gave that seat to the unknown. It's like just really consciously making space for that extra presence where there's a lot more wisdom. It moves a lot slower. It's like our animal. It's our primitive self. Before we developed language, pre-verbally, it's like the intelligence that babies have. If you have like a toddler and they're 6 months old, that state, you can tell they're fully in their perceptive senses. They're just feeling everything constantly. There's no label. Oh, this is wind. It's just like, oh. And then the mom's like, get your face out of the window. It's really cold outside. And it's like, that's like all the adult monkey conditioning. But we are really primitive, deeply intelligent creatures, and there's properties that deeper intelligence has, like it's like rhythmic, it likes repetition, it likes safety, it moves a lot slower, but it has access to like 4,000 times as many inputs. And so when I'm like moving and living in my life, it's like, okay, I'm playing chess. So I make a move, I move my pawn or I move my queen, and then I wait for something to respond, for something to happen, for something to reveal itself. And, if anyone who knows me, I'm not the most patient person. I'm really working on cultivating patience. I have strong willpower. When I want something, I get something. And so it's uncomfortable for me and for a lot of my clients to play this way, because it's like, what do you mean? That's a waste of time. We don't have time to wait. Let's just go hustle. And it's like, no, you wait. And when I do that truly, and I trust that I'm not operating solo, I get these responses, and it's these games. And so the layers of reality and the richness of what I'm creating just takes new dimensions, new textures, and way. I mean, like this offer is born of that. I have no idea where we're going today. I have no idea. I've never had anybody interview me on my own platform. Like, this is a complete first, but that's the move that I heard. And I was like, okay, well, let's do it and we'll find out. Right. And so you keep playing that way. And eventually I had this breakthrough, and I was like, holy shit. Like, what happens in chess is like, the purpose of chess is to like checkmate your opponent. And energetically, I realized that when you get checkmated, first of all, statistically, there's almost always a way out. There's almost a way to get out of losing that chess game. And even there isn't, like in those small, tiny statistical cases where you can't, you can get a new board. And so I began to develop the faith by slowing down in this very specific example, that in situations where I felt completely cornered and I felt like, that's it, I've lost, I'm fucked, game over, boo-hoo, there's always another move. And energetically, that's just the world of a difference, because you're suddenly playing an infinite game that never finishes. And I can give an example with you particularly, because before we did these lives, you came into my membership. And even though my membership has been growing steadily ever since we launched it 8 months ago, the attendance of the people on the lives had been dropping. And I'd been hearing this: more people need to have access. More people need to have access to these conversations. To the point that when you came, out of like all 50 members, there was one person that came live. And it was still a great session, and we made the most of it. And I got out of my feelings about that from an ego perspective. But in that moment, I could have been like, okay, well, I'm going to stop doing guest expert sessions because no one shows up, and they only show up to the sessions I do. And like, that's really embarrassing for my guests, and, like, whatever. But instead, I was like, I know this is happening for a reason. And I didn't know the reason. And I waited. And 2 weeks later, it was like, it's because you need to take these conversations to the public. More people need to hear these. Change the script. Here's a concept. And I was like, okay. Right. So it's really this different way of moving and making decisions through your life. And there's a lot more faith and trust and slowness in the process. But, probably like fast forward 6 months, this is going to be incredible for our visibility. There was like literally no way, nowhere that non-clients could hear my community speak, hear me speak. And now we're broadcasting it. So I feel like I would have never come up with that idea. And so my playing chess with this greater consciousness is allowing for a much more non-linear way of transforming. That's vertical, that's faster, where the miracles and the quantum leaps live, and it keeps you on your toes, right?
I mean, I love that analogy, and I'm sure everyone listening along like can really relate to that. And it's a beautiful way to bring in some of these topics that were even coming up last week of like faith and trust. Like when you're creating in this very non-linear way, so much more becomes available. Things that are way beyond your wildest imagination can come into fruition. And you really do need to cultivate that relationship with faith and trust and knowing there's always new moves to make. I'm curious on a couple of things. Like, there's two parts to this question. How do you feel you've cultivated that trust to take the steps even when it doesn't make sense? And do you have an example of a time when you've been called to make a move that was scary, or you were like, oh, how is this going to work? And then something really incredible came as a result of it?
Yeah, I'm going to say something that I've never said publicly that might get me in trouble.
Yes, we love those.
Because there might be people
on these conversations, the thing that you haven't said before.
There might be people from Deloitte listening to this, and I'm just going to own it at this point. But it was so hard for me to submit my resignation, because the last year of my Deloitte days, I was working 2 hours a month, right? Like, corporate exploits you. I figured out a way to exploit it in exactly the same way. And, it's not like I was free riding. I was actually really proud of what I'd built there, and doing work that I loved at the time, like coaching the most senior folks in policing. And like, it was really cool. But it was such a safety net that made no sense to let go of, like financially, because it really wasn't that costly in terms of my physical time. But the reason I left is because as I gained the courage to face my truth, I realized there was a huge energetic cost, because underneath, until I left, I wasn't going all in my conviction that I could fly alone. And that impacted not even my level of confidence, because I think there's always been a level of that. Like, I know a lot of women struggle with that, but I've always felt valuable in the world, but more from a place of, what if I fail? like, what if this doesn't work? Like, what if I end up on the street? What if, like, what are people going to think? Right. And honestly, too many things. I have too many examples of things that happened that make no fucking sense. Like zero sense. Like I have an extremely rational cognitive mind. I think that's why I'm able to be such a good bridge for high-end leaders, because they feel, their nervous system feel like they can trust me because they can see that from an IQ perspective, I get it. Like, I sound good, I can mirror back, I understand them just as well, if not better than they understand themselves. So we're able to develop that connection. But then I've gone deeper and I know that this is virtual. This is not real. Right. And so I just have to, I still doubt. I still doubt today. But I think I don't need convincing anymore. Right. So faith is a daily choice. It's a lifestyle. It's like you brush your teeth in the morning, you work out, you you make certain lifestyle and value decisions of how you want to live your life. And I'm really, with some of the lineages I study, this principle of, you take your time to make the decision, you incorporate everything, but once you decide, you back that decision with your entire life. You just go all in with that decision. Even if it's the wrong decision, it doesn't matter. You just back it. You can pivot later on, but we're not hedging. We're not like, I've got my feet in 17 cakes, and in case one goes wrong, I can just pretend that one never even happened. And I see so many people do that, where they don't know, and so they dilute and disperse their energy and their attention, and then they're actually not committed or devoted to any one thing. And you can always change your mind. Like, I've modeled that so many times. I'm a 6'4" in human design. Like, my life is going to be continuous refinement. And it's like I'm building like a 7,000 piece puzzle, and I don't even know what the picture looks like. So it's like, oh, this is it. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. And 3 days later, it's like, you want to bet? you sure? This thing forever. Want to bet? So you learn to learn yourself. But I've had too many unexplainable experiences, out of body experiences, results in clients, things that you just can't. And there's just, and I think it's healthy to keep doubting. Like, I'm still holding my mind, and I'm skeptical, and I question, and I use that to understand. But there's also a state beneath that where none of that's necessary. And your mind's kind of like in the back of the passenger seat, just really being a servant. Because I think this thing's role is to actually translate what's happening and be of service of our deeper intelligence, instead of actually calling the shots. So I think Western society's got it the wrong way around.
I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. There's a couple of cool things that I just want to highlight in what you said. One is that I feel this concept of, it's faith, it's intuition, it's trust in something much bigger than yourself. You can't actually get to know that and be intimate with that unless you take bold leaps of faith, unless you test it out. You can't stay safe and stay in the known and also cultivate your faith, your intuition, and your trust. Like, that very thing gets cultivated when you take the scary step. Do you agree?
I don't know. I think it's a great point. And I feel that actually you don't have to take the big leap. Sometimes, like, it's your point where you said, like, it's a whisper and then it's a truck, right? I think when disaster strikes, when you're in crisis, when there's suffering, like, sometimes people have their entire, like, assemblage point and reality built on certain core beliefs and assumptions. And something will happen left field they couldn't have expected, like someone dying, or them losing a limb, or like them not getting promoted when they literally gave up 3 years of their lives and trusted everybody who was the promotion board, like, whatever your thing is. And then it's like every belief that they held, that they kind of self-organized around, falls apart. And when that falls apart, what our left brain mind does is, we're going to die. We just go straight into survival. We can't survive this. This is like, we are fucked, you know? And the truth is, we're not. We just access a deeper layer. Welcome to the past, you know? And so when we access that deeper layer, a part of us, even if it's not conscious, learns that they were able to survive and come back from something really difficult that they never imagined they'd ever have to go through. That was really painful, but still didn't take them out. And I think in those processes of death and rebirth, people end up developing that connection and that faith because they start to realize they don't know anything and there's a really bigger unknown power. But I don't know, like, you know, this is something I argue with my teachers again and again and again, because I'm so pro humanity and I think people are geniuses. And I'm like, surely we can be proactive with this stuff. Surely we can decide to change because it's the funnest thing to do in the world. And why can't we just evolve? Because we want to. But I don't know. I think they have more years of experience than me and more years of wisdom, and more times than not. I mean, I think once you've been through enough things, then there's just kind of this conviction that develops. And so then you're on the path, like people investing in themselves, for example. But I think in the beginning, it does take a little bit of pain, because without pain, why would you change? It's like the resistance to change is greater than the desire to make yourself uncomfortable. And so people just live out the same cycles forever.
Yeah. Interesting. And so would you argue that there are two ways to change? You can either choose to take an intuitive leap sometimes towards something, and in that process, you're learning, unlearning, like healing, whatever needs to happen in that process. And then sometimes it's just pain, and that's what creates change. Like, do you feel like it can be from both angles?
I'd like to. I mean, I believe that there's no right or wrong way to do anything. And I believe there's an infinite number of ways to change. I think the most powerful change is driven by our unconscious mind. And so there's a really massive thing to say about the power of our environment, because when we're spending all days in offices surrounded by people, and this is a genuine thing that happened to me. I was really annoyed. Like the first few years at Deloitte, I was really annoyed. So I was like, how does it make more sense to look good than be good, and you get rewarded for looking good but not being good? Like, how is that a thing? And how are so many people just pretending? Like, it drove me absolutely mad, and it made me really angry. And then as I started owning myself, my point of view, doing my work, and began to have these conversations in intelligent ways that benefited the collective, people began to come forward. And I started to develop allies, and I started to have some of these real conversations behind closed doors. And I very quickly realized that everybody believes the same things I do, but everybody's pretending and nobody's doing anything about it, because that's the game that's being played. And that's what we call cultural norms. And so if you're just in that environment, eventually that rubs off on you. If you go live in an environment where people don't wear clothes, eventually nudity rubs off on you. If you live in an environment where, you know, like I'm in Tulum right now. I've been in Tulum for 4 months. When I went to Mexico City last month, like being in a city was shocking to my system. It's like I've lived in London 11 years, but being in such a big city and seeing like 7 highway roads and bridges and noise and ambulances, I was like, what on earth is this? This is not natural. This is not normal. So putting ourselves, like, we're habitual creatures, and the property of our consciousness is it takes the shape of whatever we give it. So the more we can live a life at our edge, which is something that I'm really passionate about doing, you know, like I never thought I was going to be a nomad. I had so much stuff in my apartment in London. Like, what do you mean live out of a suitcase? That's fucking insane, right? And yet I did, and I developed range. And so I think really finding those opportunities to just always be at your edge, to always be seeking expansive environments, literally in your day-to-day, would really support change.
Yeah, I love that, because I do agree with you that there's like things that happen in our life where change is forced upon us, and then there can be this, you know, like whisper, or, you know, sometimes when we're talking about change, it's like, what point of readiness are you at? And sometimes the worst place to be is like a 6 or a 7, because you're like, you're not fully living, but you're also like not in massive pain, So, you're someone who seeks to put yourself in environments to challenge, to be on your edge. And I feel like, and this is, I know, something alive for you at the moment, it's also very alive for me at the moment, is when you're feeling like, okay, I'm ready, I'm feeling desires of where I want to go next or who I'm being invited to become next. I've found this, and I want to hear your perspective on it. The best way to truly allow that to happen most effortlessly, that natural change that wants to occur, is to put yourself in an environment that is going to support that is in alignment with who you're being called to become. Do you just want to talk about that a little bit from like the neuroscience perspective, but also like, is it possible to do it without that? Or are you then trying to make change, but you're constantly bumping up, say the Deloitte's example? I'm guessing before you actually made that decision, so much of you had already internally changed. But do you feel like until you just said, I need to completely separate, like, can we change within environments that are just not supporting us? There were a few questions there, but you know what I'm asking.
I think this is a great conversation. I love it. I'm here for it. I think there are thresholds, right? Like, I think initially there's a thing that we're thinking of doing that feels so terrifying, and that it just feels crazy. It's unsafe to our nervous system, to bring in the neuroscience. And it's like, no, everything in our mind, everything in our bodies tenses and goes, no, you will die if you do this. Don't do it. And when you do it and you don't die, you learn it a little bit, but then you do it and you do it again and you do it again and you do it again and you do it again. And then it becomes normal, and then you start to take it for granted. And what's happening in your brain is, our brains are neuroplastic. So there's neurogenesis happening. So if we've been making our breakfast in the same way every morning for 15 years, or when we're in an argument, acting out the same pattern in a relationship for 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, there's neurons that fire, like there's symptoms. This is where we track energy, right? There's a criticism coming at you from your significant other, and suddenly it's like alert, alert in the brain. Alert in the brain triggers this whole sequence of dominoes in your neurons that lead to you closing the door and not speaking to your person for 2 days, and then coming back and apologizing, and whatever your thing is. That pathway has 25 years practice. So it's really anchored. It's probably unconscious. You don't even realize you do it. There's this move that I teach my clients. It kind of goes like this. It's like you're diving. And it's like you're diving and then you're opening the veil. And it's like whenever there's something you don't want to do anymore, a habit, you're self-sabotaging, whatever, it's like, how much can you slow down the thing? Like, how much can you slow down the burnout? It's like you're sick every time you go on holiday because you've been going too hard at work and you can't, right? So it's like, from the moment you become aware, how much can you track everything that happened and become aware of those patterns? And then you start to see your pathway. And the more you're aware of your pathway, the more you're creating a little bit of space, a little bit of awareness, some ability to choose differently. And it's like, okay, one day, instead of closing the door, you might just learn to express your needs in a really non-blamey way. And then there's no argument and the argument ends. But you've done that once, and you've done the smashing the door 25 years, 7,000 times. So of course you're going to regress because you've got 1 rep versus 7,000 reps, right? So there needs to be practice, exposure, repetition, conscious tracking of energy and self-exploration. But still, it's revolutionary because you've still done something different. So I see people beating themselves up because they've made one good choice and they've eaten the vegetables instead of the cake, but then they go back to eating a burger and they beat themselves up. It's like when I track my macros, I don't track whether I'm eating too much calories. I track whether I'm eating enough protein, right? Like there's an abundance. Like, am I eating enough? Not, am I eating too much? Oh, I've been bad today. It's like, and it's like you just try it, but you can't fail. It's just a game. So I think that's the piece on the neuroscience, but the piece on how do you change, and is this the only way from an environment perspective? I don't think it's the only way. I think the fastest way to change is to face your shit. is like to be honest and truthful with yourself. And like, simply put, there's like feelings you're avoiding. Like, we are all avoiding those feelings. And if we want to go deeper than that from a therapeutic prism, our unconscious mind has repressed things to keep us safe, that when the incidents happen, when the traumas arose, it wasn't actually safe for us to feel them. So in order to protect us, those got repressed, and we don't even know those exist. I've been there, right? And it's like, as we develop capacity, as we develop strength, as we develop courage, as we develop awareness, slowly our unconscious mind starts to hand one file after another that are no longer serving us, of all those outdated programs. And it's like, okay, now you can deal with this one. And sometimes it feels like quicksand. It's like, how am I again? More? I thought I healed this. What on earth's going on? And that's where I feel, when you're in a conducive environment and you have a supportive community, it's much easier because you bounce back quicker. Like, just this weekend, I've been moving so much energy, but it's so easy for my unconscious mind, because in Tulum, there's like women's circles and like conscious concerts with no alcohol and like lagoon parties. And so I went to all those things, and I was working through something with my dad. And as that was coming out, I was in the perfect space to really feel that without people being like, oh, you purging is inconvenient right now, or we're going to judge you for having feelings. And so it really just makes the process smoother, I think. And it it gives us conviction in the faith, because I mean, honestly, I wouldn't want to be on this journey on my own. I've had times where I felt isolated, and I've had times where I've been supported, and it's like a completely different experience.
Yeah, I love what you're sharing there. And I agree. I think environment can make the process, like, yes, you can change anywhere, but I feel like rather than trying to change against, and your environment is in opposition to that, versus an environment that is allowing you to support you in that, I just think it speeds up the process and allows the unfolding to be more graceful, if you would say. Yeah, that was really beautiful. I mean, I'm fascinated by change and the process of change, and I think you articulated that really beautifully. I'm curious, like, what are you being invited to personally next? Like, where are you being called to change, and what is that process looking like for you both? Again, we'll go personal life and how you're integrating that into your business and the vision for that.
Big question. How many people have we got on this live? No, I love that. I mean, it's a constant initiation, the path I've chosen. And I feel one of the things I've been really working on this year has been disappearing. And I don't mean like getting kidnapped by the Mexican cartel. I mean, a lot of my excuse me, a lot of my conditioning and programming has come from me getting a lot of validation from taking up space and being the center of attention and being the spotlight and having all eyes on me and being the loudest person at the party. And don't get me wrong, in some ways, it's a superpower, because it's opened a lot of doors for me, and there's a strength to putting yourself forward in that way. And in many ways, it became a massive Achilles heel and a massive weakness and blind spot of mine to have to do that, because we have one mouth and two ears, and the less space I take, the more everything else around me can take up space. And I get to watch that unfold and get to observe that instead of just sharing my own stuff. Right. And so initially it was so funny, because people might be shocked by this, but when I was a nomad, I was making multi six figures in my business, and on all sorts of training, sometimes taking 5 weeks at a time. My phone was on airplane mode, like being in the Amazon jungle in Peru, whatever. And in order to develop this range, this ability to be and hold, I almost took on a waitressing job. Like, I was contemplating taking on a waitressing job, right? In order to be in a position where I'm not seen. It's like, my job is to bring food to those people, right? And I've never done anything like that. Like, I've got a pretty academic background. I've like been at some of the best universities, and then I was straight into Deloitte. And it was really, really interesting. So I never did that, but what I ended up doing is there's a training that I was supporting one of my teachers facilitate, where we're training therapists, coaches, facilitators, consultants to develop mastery in the way they hold space for others and the way they coach. And it involves generative trance. And I was supporting her, and I've been through the program myself multiple times. And I was like, instead of being loud and active and leading aspects of this, I'm going to take a back seat. We agreed. And it's like, okay, this cohort, I'm not going to say anything. And it's like, honestly, it was so confronting for me because I felt useless. And it showed me how much I was used to having to prove my worth from being smart, from being useful, from sharing my views. And I felt like there was no point in me being there. And as we went on, and I was like, what are they going to make of me? They're probably going to have no opinion. Like, it was really, really confronting. And it was really revolutionary to feel how much actually just my presence was hugely supportive to the field we were developing. Just my being. And that helped me soften even more into my feminine. That helped me be less wedded to how productive my life is, right? And understand that the value is inherent in my existence rather than in my achievements. And this is a hard one for a lot of people, right? So that's one I feel very comfortable sharing with you. So I've given it. I'm going to call myself out. That was a massive tangent because, I was buying myself time, but it's real. And I feel like I've got the handle of this, and probably there's going to be a theme to continue developing that range. And it's a superpower for anybody listening to really be able to be multiple things, right? Like, you don't have to be one thing. So it's good to develop that range. But the thing I'm working at now, and honestly, it's Pandora's box, and I'm not going to say more because I want to respect the safety of my own process. But what I will say is I'm going through a massive reset of my relationship with my father. And he was a really big origin of that validation because of a number of things. And we were so close. There's so much love. Like, when I was a nomad, I'd like FaceTime him every day, every other day. Like, that was the level. And we've barely spoken since October. And this has been intentional. This has been really a big death and rebirth of our dynamic in order to up-level it and make it healthier. And some of the gifts that I'm seeing that are coming from taking the space away from him and healing my inner child and understanding all the ways I've been imprinted on has like come full force in my love life. Like, I had this like anxious avoidant attachment where, because he loved me so much, and then when he didn't like things, he would like retreat, I'd feel abandoned. So I had this abandonment wound, and I was craving consistent, loyal presence in men. And what I realized is not only has that transformed the way I relate in my romantic life, but this had actually seeped in unconscious ways I behaved with all men in the world, even those I wasn't interested in sexually. Right. And so I am opening Pandora's box of how may I have unconsciously seduced people just to be able to get those dopamine hits. Right. And it's like so much of that is really not even visible to me. And then so much of it is becoming visible. And it's really mind-blowing because if you're doing it intentionally, it's a superpower, right? I can walk into a bar and just magnetize any person that I want. And that's really fun. And I can be in my magnetic power. But if you don't know you're doing it, and let's just say that person's not open or available, or it's in a professional context, and intentionally your heart is pure and you're not aware, but it creates a lack of safety. It creates a lack of safety that can be perceived by both parties. And so it limits the depth at which you can go. And so that's the kind of new thing, but it's never ending. And if you're not on this journey, get on it, because it's like the best thing in the world.
What would you call this journey? It's very nuanced. It's very subtle.
I mean, I like to say I wake leaders up when we're waking up. But it's also one where we're like learning to really become this like unconditional love. Like, I was having this argument with someone at my house in Morocco a few months ago. And I was like, yeah, I'm super fierce and like I like challenge people and I'm bold and I'm brave. And he was like, yeah, sure, you're all of that, but that's not really what you are. And I'm like, what do you mean? Of course, I'm a warrior. And he's like, you're not a warrior, you're a lover. And I was like, I almost started crying. I felt so seen. It was like, I'm totally all about, like, this is what this work is about. It's about being able, like, why did we come here? Why are we alive? We're here to freaking experience and love our lives and just have joy and be able to give to people and just have the best time of our lives. And then we get trapped in all these conditioning and patterns and ancestral things and norms. And suddenly there's just a lot of pain and confusion and suffering, and it's all unnecessary. So it's a journey of self-liberation.
I love that. Beautiful. No, there's a lot in that, and I'm sure people can relate. Like, and it gets the overarching thing I feel like you're really doing is like allowing space for like those unconscious patterns that we don't even know and realize how they're subtly shaping our reality, bringing it to the forefront. So there is liberation. So new choices and new realities can come into play. And I know you're just, like we said, so committed to that excavation, shall we say, within yourself. And then that allows you to hold that really deep space for others. And I have been in containers and masterminds with you, and I think we've reflected of like, like we just felt like we could have gone deeper, or there was, more to explore or more realness that could have been brought to the surface. And that's something that I really want to acknowledge in you, is that, yeah, I just feel like nothing is off limits with you. And as a coach facilitator, you can only really take someone as deep in themselves as you have been willing to go yourself. And so I just want to, like, again, acknowledge you for the depths at which you go to, so that you can allow others to be met in their depths. And that's where a lot can naturally unfold. So I think we'll start to bring it to a conclusion, but I would love to know, in sort of parting, is there anything else that's come up through this conversation, or anything that you just want to kind of share that's there for you?
Only that it's really fun playing chess with God. Like,
I love that part of the conversation.
This turned out better than I could have imagined. And like living a life where you're experiencing that daily, because you're putting yourself in spaces where you just trust and have no idea. You end up rising and the moment meets you. And yeah, I've really enjoyed this conversation with you. So thank you so much for all of it.
Me too. And I love, we didn't really know, we didn't really plan where we were going to go, the questions I was going to ask. And I think that's just allowed a lot of magic to kind of come to the surface. And I hope everyone who has tuned in or watches the replay, I always say, got at least one. Sometimes we tune in and it's just perfect timing that we listen to something like this. And there's normally just one thing that, if we really receive that one thing and actually take it, because there's so much information out there that gets shared, but especially when something's more of a live transmission like this, and you just take that one message that you needed to hear and actually allow it into your life, that's where change and transformation can happen, and very quickly.
Wise words. Take Sarah's advice, and that's how you change your life. So yeah, thank you guys for being here. And this feels really indulgent, actually. I kind of like it.
Love it. All right, great to chat, and goodbye.
Bye, everybody.